Previously on Cinemaniacs.
Nathan Jr. exists me for what I am, and I think you better have too.
I lived through it. It was okay. It's not the greatest ever. I really wish they would have taken
There
their
are
time
so
out.
many other films that this brought to mind, and I didn't see anything new in this. I thought it was often, especially at the very beginning, overtly
And almost out of the
voyeuristic.
gate, the camera is all shaky during the action, and it's cutting really fast. And I'm like, I get the impression that Captain America just beat somebody up, but I don't
That's
know
all we
how.
saw at the theaters.
Yes.
And we can move on, again, even though it is all video, we can move on to that kind of video that you might get on your little device.
So I saw this trailer, and my first thought was, I need to see this as big as possible,
Holy
with
moly.
as many added gimmicks as possible. Hi.
Deja vu. Sorry.
So, brand new intro.
Brand new intro, yes.
Made up of old material.
Yeah.
Featuring, hi, I'm Mark,
And I'm Tom,
and we are
the Cinemaniacs.
So-
Or as it was previously said, Cinemaniacs. I always put the definitive article.
The
The.
Cinemaniacs?
I always say the, but
Well, you know,
technically we're listed as
if you look for us on the
Cinemaniacs.
YouTube, there are other programs
That's
or
true.
people called
who
Cinemaniacs.
think they're Cinemaniacs.
So we are the Cinemaniacs.
There you go.
Amongst several others.
Fair enough.
So it's been a week since we've done a new show, unless somebody watched our previous episode very, very recently, in which case there's been no time at all since our last new show.
Well, and strangely enough, I didn't find that there was that much to talk about. Strangely.
Well, I saw some movies that
You
aren't
did,
on
that's
the
true,
list today,
that's
and we'll just move on with the ones that are on the list today, and you'll just have to wonder what else I saw unless there's time at the end of the show. First up, would you
Yes.
care to introduce?
I'd love to.
Well, please.
Have you had enough of things happening a long time ago in galaxies far, far away? Well, the Disney Corporation hopes not, because they're retooling some important information. Where did those dice come from? Let's really emphasize those dice, because they're going to be hanging in your face like something we won't discuss before 10 o'clock. And so you might find out where a big furry guy comes from and lots of other things if you want to find out the history of Solo.
Ordinary things don't seem to appeal? Then try one of our frozen delicacies.
So everybody's kind of back. I was expecting not to like this, strangely enough. I don't know, for some reason I get the sense, because I'm a big Star Wars fan, I remember standing in line for hours, literally around the block in 1977 to see the first one. And so I followed it constantly. Solo is clearly my favorite character, and strangely enough, I was eventually leading to this comment. I've heard that he's the favorite character of more people than anybody else. Like everybody, but the most people like Solo the most. I don't know why, but I do. And so when I first heard, I don't know the actor's name, but I saw him in Hail Caesar.
Why, it's Alden and Ehrenreich.
Yes, very good, Ehrenreich. When I first heard that they'd cast him, I got to thinking, yay, that might be kind of interesting. My major complaint is that I don't see him, and maybe this was intentional, trying to be anything like Harrison Ford. It's just him. And so while I don't want the overt, and you and I were talking before we got on here, I don't want the overt in your face, oh, that's how they did this, or oh, there's references to the past.
I hate that.
I want it a little bit. In the reboot of Star Trek's, first of all, Zachary Quinto is amazing as playing Leonard Nimoy, but he's his own character. But Chris Pine has little mannerisms of William Shatner, and those are fun to see. I wanted some of that, but Ehrenreich does none of that. He's okay. If this were a brand new character, I might think, oh, he's okay. But I didn't get from Solo what I wanted from it. It was enjoyable. This is awful to say. With Ron Howard as the director, he's a real actor's director, and so I expected character development, but there's an awful lot of it, and I was kind of disappointed. I wanted more battles and stuff. It's long; it's like 2.5 hours long, I think.
I don't remember.
Overall, I was kind of on this. I guess it's not doing terribly well. I went to see it again with my son in IMAX, and there were 20 people in the theater.
That's what I'm hearing everywhere, is that this is not
Yeah.
making the kind of money that the studios want it to make.
And they've already signed on for 3 of them.
good, because I liked
Yeah,
this.
I liked it.
And I don't know what people's beef is. I've been talking about this with a lot of friends over the weekend. A lot of people think it's Star Wars fatigue. You know, many of
Right.
us grew up in an era where you got one movie every, well, you got one movie every couple of years. Then you got squat for about a decade, or more. And now it's more regular. And with the Marvel movies coming out like every 2 or 3 weeks, it feels like, and now the Star Wars movies at a more and more rapid pace. In a way, that is brilliant marketing because it never leaves the popular consciousness. And
Right.
one film advertises, you know, Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars in the theater. Hey, Star Wars is on video, and they cross-promote each other and all that stuff. But I think part of it is Star Wars fatigue. I think part of it is what I had to deal with going into this. And I had some counseling, and I talked to good friends and family members, and we held hands, and we tapped the table a little bit. Thinking of anybody else as Han Solo.
Right.
I went in and I'm like, this is not going to be Harrison Ford, and I'm going to have to get over that really damn quick because
Right.
it's going to be 2 hours.
I was
with
ready
somebody
for
else.
that.
And when I first saw the pictures, I'm like, ooh, he looks very, very pretty boy delicate to be
Yeah.
Han Solo. But he had the attitude, I thought. And it was not far into the movie where I'm like, okay, this guy's Han Solo. This guy is this movie's
See, I never
Han
got
Solo.
there.
He's not the Han Solo I grew up with.
Okay.
He is. I'm watching a character who has that name, who is a wink wink rapscallion BS artist. And this is what I love. So you get, everybody is younger. It's the younger, hotter version of Star Wars, which is
Right.
every reason to make any prequel, apparently. And by the way, prequels, they're BS too. There's no need for prequels. I don't care where he got the limp. I don't care where he got the scar. I don't care how so-and-so met so-and-so. It's not, oh, that's how it happened. It's, this is what these people just made up.
Right.
You know, how he got his name, a lot of people are talking about that. It's really lame. I didn't need to know that.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, Han Solo just could have been the guy's name. But Aaron Reich, I thought he was really fun and charming.
Okay.
I thought Donald Glover as the young Lando Calrissian
was
fantastic.
unbelievable.
He acted just like Billy D, a younger Billy D. I love that both of these characters are two sides of the same coin. They give off this not completely successful, well, maybe more so with Lando. With Han, it's not a completely successful veneer of knowing exactly what he's doing and always being in control when he really isn't.
Right.
He wants everybody to think he's far smarter than he really is, but he's really making it up as he goes along. But I love that about this movie, how he'd BS his way through a situation and figure things out and have a plan that maybe would, maybe wouldn't go correctly.
If people haven't seen it, I want to encourage them to listen carefully. Because we're introduced to Lando just by his voice. We're following him. And I would have sworn, if you'd cut the film right then, I would have put money that it was actually Billy D. Williams.
It's a wonderful performance.
The actor is
Donald Glover. He was
Donald-
on Community, and he's
Right.
the musical act known as Childish Gambino, and he's on another current
I just
thing.
thought he was terrific.
He
stole the show from
He's a
me.
versatile performer.
Yes, certainly.
So the film is fun. It's a caper movie. It's a heist movie. It's a young Han Solo getting, you see how he meets Chewbacca and all this other stuff. And again, that story, I don't care. But the relationship between Han and Chewie, it clicks in pretty quickly. And I'm like, yes, that's natural and that works for me. Effects were really good. This is available in 3D. I saw moments that might
was it?
work in
Okay, I
3D,
didn't-
but
okay.
again, when your foreground is in focus and your background is out of focus, how are you getting any depth out of that? You don't. It's not made for 3D.
Strangely, I expected to be getting tired of Woody Harrelson, who seems to be in pretty much everything. 80% of this film, I liked him a lot. I thought he was a great. There's a surprise twist. Oh, what a surprise! A plot twist at the end with him. Not going to give anything away. So I got a little tired of that. But for the most part, I thought he was really fun too.
And I will say, I'm not going to give anything away because I love to have the surprises that were in this film.
Right.
There's a character that makes an appearance in this film,
Yes.
and it's very surprising. And it took me out of the movie because I started doing math.
Yes, I did too.
And the answer to this, if you
Wait a
haven't seen
minute.
Solo yet, is the math works. Apparently, if you have to be aware of every Star Wars thing ever.
Right, you've
to
got to-
know that this character being here.
You've
it
got to
works.
really know what's called the canon.
Yes.
All of the comic books and all of the animated shows and things like that. When we meet this character at the end, which is a character that we've seen before and was great.
Yes.
So that can be
So-
kind of fun too.
It's legit.
Right.
Had I known that going in, if somebody said there's going to be a surprise,
just go with it
and go
and-
with it,
and forget it,
I would
yeah.
have not started doing math in my head and
Right.
thinking about multiple timelines for characters. Anyway, I thought Solo was a lot of fun. It's I think fine for kids. It's an adventure.
Yeah.
The way I thought of this movie going in while I was watching it was this is going to be akin to the Star Wars comic books that were written in the 70s and early 80s.
Okay.
Or this is going to be like those Splinter of the Mind's Eye and those novels, the Han Solo at Star's End stuff. This is just another little adventure. And I would be thrilled if we got more of these little adventure movies that didn't tie into the big series, because they do that in this. They do little things that are like,
I don't think that's
well,
going to happen.
down the line you might want to. And I'm like, no.
I think
How
so
about,
many of the fans, the real diehard fans, love that stuff.
I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
To me, it's pandering, and it makes me start thinking about something else. And it locks it into a timeline. Like this movie feels like he's going to very, very soon go off and be in the first Star Wars movie. And I'm like, no. How about we do all kinds of other stuff before we get there?
Well, when you're right about making me think about other stuff, because then that takes me out of the film. It was like in Empire Strikes Back. Sorry, I'm going to become a geek. I'm going to be geeky here. But Luke's all having this vision of Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan says, there you'll go learn from Yoda, the Jedi Master who instructed me. Well, then go back to when Qui-Gon Jinn actually instructed him. Obi-Wan wasn't instructed by Yoda. He was instructed by Qui-Gon Jinn. So,
see, that's why the prequels
you
just
make these
messed everything
references,
up.
and you're right. I spend all this time thinking about it, or I spend my time doing math. How old must this character that we just saw be, or must Han be? Yeah.
But in the end, I don't know that you necessarily have had to have seen any Star Wars movie before to appreciate this. It's going to mean more. Certain things are going to mean more. But it's
well,
a rare.
You won't be comparing him to Ford quite so much.
And I mean, there are things that will be like, oh, that's the resonance. But otherwise, it's a fun adventure, space caper, heist, action movie.
Don't you think you could have
funny.
trimmed 15, 20 minutes out of it?
I think you could trim 15 minutes out of just about any movie these days.
Right, probably.
But I quite enjoyed it. And this is one I would see again if given the opportunity. You saw it twice.
Yep.
So don't let the bad box office and poo-poo word of mouth sway you from seeing this on a big screen, which is where Star Wars movies are meant to be seen and heard. I have zero interest
but
at home
strangely enough,
in
I
watching
think this will
any of it.
translate really well to quote-unquote small screen, the 60-inch screen, or something like that, because a lot of it is, I mean, just earlier I complained that there was so much character development, but a lot of it is that, and so that was kind of amusing too and enjoyable.
So if we may move on to another distant galaxy,
we should.
Far, far away, a galaxy so far away this film is contained within it. It was inaccessible to us this last 2 weeks. But we'll talk about it. We'll show you the clip anyway. So aliens come down from another world, see the alien connection, to try to assess this weird thing that is humanity. And they find out something that had eluded me for the majority of my personal life, and that is how to talk to girls at parties.
Accidentally pull a speaker loose, please turn it in at our snack bar or box office.
Whoops. Turn that down. Not that I don't pay full attention to the show and try to give the most that I can for the end. So anyway, I didn't see
super
that.
breakout over
Looked
there.
interesting, but I didn't see it.
And either did I. Speaking of things that are murky and lost in the void.
And you can't quite tell exactly what's going on. A young woman can't tell exactly what's going on because unfortunately she's blind. But she hears some unusual things and finds out later that a murder is committed in an apartment near hers. And she has to go on the hunt to try to see if she can solve everything and find the killer. Trouble is, once again, she's blind, so she has to do all of this in darkness.
That looks really cool.
It was very interesting. I'll be quick since there's only me discussing it at this point. But I went into this hoping, we had one really smart movie recently, A Quiet Place, that uses sound design really smartly. And so when I didn't see the trailer for this, I just saw the description of it and said, boy, this would be really great if they were smart enough. Don't use that word with Hollywood too often. But if they were smart enough to use sound design to help us both get into her situation and to help her solve these things. If you remember, I may be showing my age and you may not be old enough to remember an Audrey Hepburn television show called Wait Until Dark.
It was a theatrical film based on a play.
Was it really? I thought it was, okay. But that was pretty interesting. And so I was expecting something similar to this. You really kind of get that. This is very well shot. She's really good. It's pretty smart. I found the ending to be a little bit kind of, it was foreshadowed a little bit too heavily. But overall, it was a pretty smart film, and I think In Darkness is something that because it's not going to be everywhere, it's either worth trying to seek out if you don't have to drive too terribly far, or certainly keep your eyes on it for video.
That's all we're going to discuss that was in theaters this weekend. We thank our friends at the Latches Theater and historic Latches Theater in Brattleboro, Vermont for sponsoring this fine program. It's
Easy
been a
for him
while.
to say.
And we now move on to that which is available on the home video format, platform, service, device of your choice. First up is a film featuring a team of scientists that go out into a strange zone where the laws of physics and nature seem not to apply. We have Natalie Portman and Jennifer Jason Leigh, among others, in a film entitled Annihilation.
Protein you require from wieners made by Oscar Mayer.
Man, that looks action-packed with a lot of fisticuffs and violence.
You might think so, based on the trailer. There was one, I hadn't seen this in the theaters. There was one trailer that came out that I would have sworn made it look like she goes in, Natalie Portman goes in, she's a biologist, and finds a great big ape. Well, it turns out
was Rampage.
Yeah, something like that. What actually happens is she's a biologist who, I guess she had 7 years. They emphasize this a lot. I think the only reason they do this is because so she can take out a big gun and we'll believe it. She was in the Army for 7 years. So then she becomes a biologist. Her husband, whom she met in the Army, is called off to this, there's this strange event occurring someplace on Earth in the jungles, and it's called the Shimmer. And it shimmers, strangely enough, and you send people in there and they never come back. You never know what happens. It's been 3 years. Strangely enough, her husband comes back, and he's not himself. So she gets sucked into it, no pun intended, it's odd that, and they make reference to this, it's a team of 5 women. They're all interconnected, and that explains it somewhat later. But they're scientists. They go into this shimmer where the laws of nature are completely all wonked out. The first hint you get of it is Portman finds this long trail of vine, and as she's analyzing it, it's all sorts of different types of flowers and things like that. How this couldn't possibly have happened, and you find out that the shimmer. I don't think this is giving anything away. The shimmer is clearly alien or not from this earth in nature, and it's mingling all DNA on the planet and turning things into all sorts of new things. So you get this super huge bear, and this was pretty creepy. This bear attacks one of the party and kills her. And then later on, we have a scene where the rest of the party is asleep, and the bear comes in, and when it growls, it speaks in that woman's voice.
That's weird.
Because it's really, some of it is really creepy. The vast majority of this is very, very slow. And it's, we intercut back and forth. And so you get this pace building, and the energy just drops, because then you cut back to Natalie Portman being essentially interrogated by scientists in our world. Oh, what happened? How did you, please keep explaining. I never understand the structure of that thing, and so that was so this was very disjointed. I think it tried really hard to intentionally be slow, trying to be 2001-ish, I guess. Ultimately, I found this pretty slow and kind of pretty boring, and trying very hard to be super smart and kind of explain to the audience, but intentionally not explaining anything to the audience, so the audience can think, oh, wow, it's so mystifying. I wasn't crazy about Annihilation. Portman is strong, but she doesn't have a lot to do. I didn't even recognize Jennifer Jason Leigh until you mentioned her being in the show. So in the long run, if you're a big fan of semi-intelligent science fiction, I think it's worthwhile. Visually, it's beautiful. It's stunning to look at. Portman is okay, but I'd give Annihilation maybe a 5 or something like that.
So that kind of sounds like just a really long, slow session, playing Monopoly or something.
Yeah, quite possibly. See how he does that? It's amazing. But would you rather see Natalie Portman, or would you rather see Rachel McAdams? I have my preferences. Rachel McAdams plays a woman who has a bunch of friends. She and her husband invite a bunch of friends over every week to play fun little adventure things. Sometimes they're board related and games and stuff like that. Unfortunately, who's her husband? I forget who her husband
That's
is played
Jason
by.
Bateman.
Yeah, Jason Bateman. Thank you very much. Jason Bateman's brother shows up. When your brother shows up, it's never going to go well, right? Brother's always better at everything else. Well, the brother decides that he's going to treat everybody to a murder mystery party. Trouble is, it turns out to be a real murder mystery, and nobody else knows it because it's game night.
Old Milwaukee tastes as great as its name.
So I thought when these trailers first came out, I liked both of them a lot. I thought, what a great concept. Just check your mind at the door and have a lot of fun. And while this is fun, and it's amusing, and the performances are all good, I think my major complaint about this is that I didn't think it did enough with what I thought was some really solid potential. That trailer doesn't even reference a subplot where there's a neighbor who is a rent-a-cop, and he always wants to get involved, but they never include him. And initially I found that subplot kind of intentionally annoying, but it works pretty well into the, and I ultimately, in retrospect, I'm liking it more than I did when I watched it. I think if I were to just expect less of it, I think I'm going to enjoy it a lot. It's fun. There's some clever tricks and stuff like that. No nudity, as I recall. It's rated R for basically some violence and a lot of language. But the performances are okay. It's just I didn't think they had nearly, both for the couple good stars, good actors, and the potential of the story, I didn't think they did enough with it.
Rated R for violins and profundity.
Easy for you to say.
Oh, we're at such a world. I didn't really care for this that much.
Right.
I'm not somebody who considers a movie good and funny if based on intent. I think I have a feeling. I have a feeling the majority of the audience is right along with a comedy as long as they're told it's supposed to be funny, and I don't know, people smile. There's a lot of crap out there. This was, again, good premise, good people in it, but my memory of it is that it just wasn't that funny,
right.
And pretty dark and mean-spirited a lot of the time, and which I like at times too.
Right.
But it just didn't work for me. I just remember thinking, this is kind of a waste. It made me really want to watch the two Horrible Bosses movies again.
Yes.
Which are extremely funny and dark.
The second one, I think, even funnier than the first. Yeah.
I mean, they're very R-rated, but I just love the hell out of those two movies. I even almost said a dirty word. And this one just kind of sat there for me, so I didn't really care for this one. Speaking of films.
Yes.
My turn, right? Yep.
You hated it so much, I mean, it made you see red.
It made me, thank you.
See, I'm working on it. It's rubbing off.
We have Jennifer Lawrence is back once again in an female actiony role, as opposed to her being in a male actiony role, which she probably could do if she wanted to.
She'd be great at that.
As a Russian operative in funny enough, somewhere toward Russia, who is sort of by circumstance put into the world of espionage, and her code name is Red Sparrow.
Jimmy, please, not now. I'm too busy.
So this was good.
Yes.
This is an espionage movie. This is not an action movie. I think a lot of people are going to watch this
there's some
thinking,
in it, but it's got a lot more Le Carré than I expected.
It's not another Atomic Blonde. I saw that in the theater. Really well shot. Everybody in it's really solid. There are moments of violence and very brutal,
yes, extreme violence.
Just kind of cringe-inducing violence here and there. It's saucy at times.
Yep, full frontal nudity with Jennifer.
And it was good. It's just, this is the kind of thing that there were trailers that made this look like, it's going to be an action-packed film, and it's not. It's really about the mental state she has to get into, for going from somebody who's just a normal person who's having a hard time making ends meet, and then sort of gets taken into, we'll take care of everything for you if you just do this little thing for us. And that little thing is something that she wasn't quite prepared for, and it escalates and goes on and on. So this is would be a good double feature with Atomic Blonde if you want the female ass kicker double feature, communist bloc, set in the past. Although I don't think this was necessarily set in the past. Atomic Blonde was like early 80s. Yeah. I think this is contemporary. But again, very well made, good performance by everybody involved, really solid, just not a thrill ride so much as more drama than action, I would say.
What you said, basically. But speaking of thrill rides, moving on, based on a true story, you're going to have some problems with terrorism, both in Europe, here, locally, all over the world, but some U.S. Marines. That's who you're going to call. You got to call them if you need some trouble. They happen to be on a transport heading into the capital of France when a terrorist decides that he's going to cause some problems. Well, if you're those folks and you don't want to get into trouble, you don't want to be on the 1517 to Paris.
That leaves you with a nice warm glow.
So one of the things that they played up a lot in these trailers, and I think they did it here, unless I trimmed it, was that those are the guys. Those are the real guys who did this. And Clint Eastwood is our director, who, boy, if there's a guy who knows how to make movies. So I'm thinking that could be interesting, the real people. If anybody can get a good performance out of just average Joes, it would be Clint. But I guess not.
Might not
because, wow, I just thought this was bad. Great intentions, and what a wonderful story. And this is what, the human condition can be all about. Boy, it starts off on the wrong foot, and unfortunately that trailer reminded me, I had this nauseous feeling as we were watching this, because I remembered for the first half hour we spend with them as kids, and the kid performers are awful, and the dialogue is just insipid, and the adult teachers, the words that come out of their mouths about it's just one of the worst first half hours of a film I've ever seen, and it doesn't get much better. I just thought, I'm sorry, absolute kudos to the men and women who serve, and here's an area where they're not serving on the battlefield, but it is the battlefield. The world's become the battlefield, and that's a great story, but this was just a bad movie about it.
This was really bad. I mean, now, a lot of people are going to like it and love it. A lot of people are going to like it and love it because of what the guys did. Mm-hmm. You're not going to take away from that. These guys did something great, and they saved a lot of lives, and there's no disrespect as far as the guys who were in the movie. But they're not actors. Right. And if I'm going to pay to watch somebody on a big screen for 2 hours in the dark, I might want a little acting ability. The best way to experience this story, watch a documentary. Go on YouTube. I'm sure you'll find like a Dateline report or something that'll be these guys telling their story and all that, and that'll be fantastic. And you won't waste 2 hours watching guys just kind of wandering around Europe a little bit who can't act and delivering dialogue that's mundane and boring. You get what is, to my understanding, an incredibly accurate account or depiction of the incident on the train. Apparently the whole incident was only like a minute and a half.
Right.
Most of the people who are passengers on the train are playing themselves. The guys are playing themselves. The terrorist, luckily not playing himself. Hopefully he's playing himself very, 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 very low. Somewhere with a lot of earth on top of him. So it all leads up to that. So the whole movie, you're just waiting for this thing to happen. That's a minute and a half. And you get them as kids, and the whole theme of the movie is everything happens for a reason, and this is their great purpose or whatever. And you see all the incidents in their lives that basically brought them together as childhood friends, kept them together in their 20-somethings or whatever years they're at now, and got them onto that train at that time and how everything played out. But so I guess if you're really fascinated by that incident, this gives you all the backstory for it. Mm-hmm. But it's based on a book. And there's no bad acting in a book. Right. And the book is as good as your mind makes it.
You can cast anybody you want in that book.
So no disrespect to anybody involved in that incident, but this was bad. This was like laughably bad while I was watching it in the theater, and I'm like, I shouldn't be laughing at any of this, but it was just not good.
I thought it was just amazingly cringeworthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just like, wow, Clint. Boy,
exactly.
I still think he has good movies left in him, but this wasn't one of them, and arguably Jersey Boys wasn't.
I'd love him to come out with one really good one and then finally say, because I thought 10 years ago he said he wasn't going to make any more movies. I'm like, that's too bad. And then every year he comes out with one or two. I sure hope this isn't the last one, because I'd hate to leave a bad taste in my brain.
Well, now for one of the most extreme gear shifts we've ever had on this program, we'll discuss the next film. Out now via the MVD Rewind collection, which we've been talking about. They release, 80s video store classics into the 90s. We have the sequel to a film by Wes Craven, this time directed by Jim Wynorski of Lost Empire and many other film fame, Deathstalker 2, a lot of films I quite like. We have The Big Green Guy is Back, The Man in the Swamp. He comes back to avenge those doing wrong against those who are innocent in The Return of Swamp Thing.
Wonderful idea.
New hidden magic with conditioners. The first rich hairspray.
Yeah, I remember seeing this in the theaters, and then when you brought this to our attention on video, it brought back a lot of both pleasant and not pleasant memories.
So, for anybody who doesn't know, Swamp Thing was a comic book, started in the early 70s. And it was the tale of this guy who, a scientist working on a formula, something bad happens, he gets set on fire, jumps in the swamp, and basically the swamp absorbs his consciousness, and he emerges as this humanoid creature who rights wrongs and takes on Unmen and Arcane and all these evil creatures. Wes Craven made a movie in 1982, loosely based on the comic, which Louis Jourdan is the bad guy and Dick Durock as Swamp Thing, and Adrienne Barbeau was the female character in that, and that did pretty well. And that, my understanding is that kind of restarted or re-kicked out the Swamp Thing comic after the movie came out. And then you had Alan Moore come in, and John Totleben and Steve Bissette and that gang, and they turned it into something way more cerebral and deep and adult. And that's what I was into. I really loved that comic book as a kid in the 80s. So I think it's the only comic book that I bought then out of the many that I still have and like to reread. So I was into that comic book when this movie came out. Okay. And it's not that true to the depth of the comic book that as it was existing at that time, but it's a lot of fun.
Oh, and Heather Locklear.
And Heather Locklear's in it, and she's fun. And Louis Jourdan comes back as the bad guy again, and Sarah Douglas is in it, and Monique Gabrielle's in it, and some people you might know from that era. And it's just fun. It's more of a comedy, so it's fun and funny. At the time, I really liked this because aspects of it were closer to the comic that I knew than the Wes Craven movie. His look, the Swamp Thing suit, looked a bit more like it did in the comic. And there's a sequence where he basically can come up, you see in the trailer, he comes up as this ooze and a drain and basically reconstructs himself, which was one of the really cool things they were doing in the comic at the time. He could turn himself into a husk and his consciousness would flow through all the vegetation, and it's a really cool comic book. You've got to trust me on that. So the movie has a little bit more of that. Ultimately, it's a very, very simple plot where Louis Jourdan is a bad guy in the swamp doing bad stuff and creating monsters, and Swamp Thing's trying to stop it, and Heather Locklear is Louis Jourdan's niece, and it's fisticuffs and stuff blowing up and wisecracking jokes, and there's two really funny little kids in it. When I first saw this movie, what gives me goosebumps every time I watch this is, and some people say it's the best part about the movie, but you get a little pre-title sequence. Swamp Thing is introduced. He saves somebody. He says a nice thing. He winks. And Creedence's Born in the Bayou kicks in. And every time I watch it, I'm like, how the hell did they get Born in the Bayou for this movie? And then the opening credits are all artwork from the Swamp Thing covers. So it's really cool, and it's a really nice title sequence with that music and that piece. And it sets a really nice mood that probably, had it not had that opening, you wouldn't be starting off with such a nice bit of gusto at the beginning of the film. The special effects are fun. It's the era of practical effects, which I like. I prefer. There's some cool, like animated effects that are really neat. It's a lot of fun. It's PG-13, maybe I would say at best. It's not very explicit, and there's very little profanity. There's no nudity. I used to show this to a nephew of mine back in the early 90s when I had a copy of this on tape, and he loved it. Every time he came over, he wanted to watch Swamp Thing Comes Back, he called it. So this is now out on Blu-ray, looking the best it's ever looked. The VHS and the former DVD edition that I owned and the Laserdiscs you can pretty much junk unless you collect them, because this looks amazing. You've got a new commentary by Jim Wynorski and the editor and I believe the producer or executive producer of the film. You have the 2003 commentary that was on the last DVD that I owned, so they're porting over extras I'm a fan of. You've got vintage Greenpeace TV spots that they shot with Swamp Thing, which I saw on TV back then, and I could not believe it. I happened to catch one on tape, and it's hilarious and wonderful. And Dick Durock was great as Swamp Thing. He had a really good way about him with the character. You get new interviews with some of the creative team, so it's a really nice package. I think you get a poster too, and the slipcase that looks like the old VHS cover. So I thoroughly enjoy the return of Swamp Thing, and it's out now via MVD. Rest.
Yes.
Now we have one more film to discuss, which I often say is my favorite part of the show, because Tom gets an arrow right in the hymen leg.
I'm changing that soon.
Right in the fent, the Arrow Video Corner. This week, only one film to discuss, unlike some where we have 12 to get through in 10 minutes. This is interesting. This is another film directed by Roger Donaldson, who directed Sleeping Dogs that we talked about a couple weeks ago. This is a movie I remember being on HBO when we first got HBO. And it's interesting the width and breadth of stuff HBO would get, because this is not a very commercial film, or it wasn't in this country. I'm not sure it even really got a theatrical release here. This is from 1980-81, I may be wrong, and it is a story of a man who is sort of obsessed with his junkyard auto salvage business, race car that he's trying to fix up, much to the detriment of his wife and daughter, who enjoy what he does and enjoy him, but would like a little bit more than the junkyard, perhaps. The junkyard, which is named, appropriately enough, Smash Palace.
Because they taste delicious and give you vitamins and protein, too.
Well, I guess that sums it up.
Yes, exactly. So Roger Donaldson, who people probably would know for his Hollywood work, he did No Way Out, he did Cocktail, he did Dante's Peak. He did a really good movie that I would recommend called The World's Fastest Indian within the last 10 years or so. It had Anthony Hopkins as a man who...
That's right.
Indian motorcycle is what it's about. So he wants to set a land speed record with this old Indian motorcycle in the Salt Flats in Utah. And that's a really good, fun, uplifting, just wonderful movie. But we're not talking about World's Fastest Indian. We're talking about Smash Palace right now, which is now out from Arrow on Blu-ray. And I didn't really get into Smash Palace too much. This is what we call like a slice of life drama. It's this guy... as I said, working at this auto shop, and he's just really focused on this one thing, and he wants to do well in this race. And his wife is like, maybe we could go out and do something. He's like, after the race. And so she starts to have interest in other people, and she moves out, and the daughter moves out. And the guy is so frustrated by his family splitting apart that he starts to go a little crazy, and he gets obsessive, and ultimately takes a hostage, and things go south for the guy. So it gets very dramatic toward the end of the film. But I had the same problem with this that I had with Sleeping Dogs, and I don't know if it's Australian and New Zealand cinema in general, or of that era, or if it's the way Roger Donaldson directs his actors, but the performances are very low key. And a lot of the people feel like they're not actors, which sometimes can be good and sometimes not. And it was just, the execution of the acting in the film was so laid back and so low key that I was just not interested in anybody. It was very fly on the wall, which can work. I know this film is acclaimed, was very acclaimed at the time and has been over time, as was Sleeping Dogs, but for me, I couldn't get into it. The transfer looks good. I don't think this film ever looked amazing. So the trailer we ran was pretty muted tones. The color looks better on the actual Arrow transfer. But when a film is shot in an area that isn't colorful, I'm going to say it's razor sharp. It looks very, very good. It didn't blow me away, but I don't think it was supposed to.
Not exactly appropriate for all family members?
No. As I mentioned to Tom off air, our lead, Bruno Lawrence, who's no longer with us, he had no shame in a certain scene of being naked in broad daylight in front of God and everybody. So if you know Bruno Lawrence, if you love Bruno Lawrence, if you ever wonder what Bruno Lawrence looks like without his pants on, this movie lets you find out. Not in a salacious way. It's just like he's naked for a bit. To prove he did that to prove a point. So as far as extras go, you have a full commentary with Roger Donaldson. You have an hour-long making of that was done fairly recently in the 2000s, retrospect on the film, and then some trailers. So again, if it's a movie you like, there's plenty of information about how it all came together. I watched some, if not all, of the making of, and it was pretty cool because they go back to the original locations, which even though I didn't really care for the movie, it was kind of neat. Like the junkyard in the movie was a junkyard. And Donaldson goes back there and he's walking around. It looks exactly like it did, 30 years earlier. And you see a part of the truck that's the wrecking truck in the movie is just still sitting there. So he's like, yeah, this is all that's left of the truck from the movie. And it's just like, wow, it's just sitting there in a junkyard with the logo still on the side. So Smash Palace is out now from Arrow. And that's all we have to discuss, I think. Next week, we will indeed be back with more films containing but not limited to Ocean's 8, Hereditary, and maybe some of the stuff I saw this weekend we didn't talk about. So until then, I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we are
the Cinemaniacs.